I would like to welcome everybody to the 2020-2021 Virginia Science Olympiad annual meeting. As Karen mentioned, we are recording the meeting for posterity. The first thing, my name is Andrew Skinner. I'm the vice chair of the board. First of all, I would like to thank everybody. With the pandemic this season, it was a very topsy-turvy season. A big thank you to everyone who made this season a success. A thank you to students, coaches, teachers, volunteers. We really appreciate the effort that folk made to make sure Science Olympiad was a bit of normalcy in a chaotic year for everybody. The next thing I want to talk about is the board. So Karen, if you could move to the next slide. Each year we at our annual meeting we elect new board members. We have two slates. Our board is split up into people who are part of the board in even years and people who are part of the board in odd years. And this year you all voted on folk in the odd year. We really appreciate everybody voting, and everybody was elected, including Anita Sahai, myself, Andrew Skinner, Sam Tennyson, Emily Owens, and Tim Harrison. Emily and Tim will be both new members to the board. We also have in our board from our even year, Karen, Saris, Alan, Dantam, and Leah. Karen continues to be our state director at the moment. So I would like to hand this over to Alan to talk about Division A.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. Good morning. We had another good year for Division A. We held basically a hybrid type of virtual competition where the students took tests online, but then we had the parents become event supervisors and they had to videotape all our little building events that we had going on. So we felt it worked very well, very successful. You can see our numbers are down. That was expected because of it being totally virtual. In the fall, Karen, if you go to the next slide. In the fall, we do expect to hold a fall event again, back to the fall. It works better for our planning and for our timing and whatnot. We will have third grade events again, just for third graders, because they will be new coming into the system. We are always looking for new ideas and new volunteers to help with Division A. Just drop me a line, let me know if you're interested in all that. I do want to give all the high schools and middle school volunteers out there a task, and that's to reach out to those elementary feeder schools and see if you can drum up future members for your teams by helping start a team at your school. So look forward to another year, and thank you.
Thanks, Alan. I think it turns over to me now to talk about Division B and C. I'm Karen Emmons, the state director. Just an adjustment, I'm not actually a member of the board based on year. State director position is appointed by the board. So, but that's just a small change to something said earlier. So thank you all. What a year this was. And I know that we all went into it with great fear and trepidation, and this is what our numbers look like. We knew we would be down, right? We did a poll last August. We talked to people. We know some schools didn't allow any extracurriculars, that just even the thought of trying to figure out how to mentor or do Science Olympiad was going to be very difficult. But actually, we did really surprisingly well, I think, in our enrollment. So you can see, yes, we were down, but it wasn't quite as bad as we feared. And I'm going to go to the next slide to show you why that is. I do want to make a note here that because we had to use Olympiad software for registration, Olympiad has no capacity for demographic information in it currently. So normally this graph, when I show this exhibit, we have information about the percentage of girls, there's just a variety. How long have people been participating? Which, what percentage of schools were free and reduced lunch, that kind of thing. We don't have access to that readily this year. So I'm really sorry about that. And that's something actually I've requested that the writer of Olympiad adds some facility into the program. Because one of the things that I've always been really, really proud of is the fact that we are about 50% girls in this program, which is unheard of in a STEM program. And in fact, in high school, I'm basing this on the last couple of years of information. In high school, we're actually over 50% girls, which is also very counter to general STEM trends. So I think that is marvelous, exciting information. But this is what I wanted to tell you, that I thought our retention was so good. So overall, we kept in Division B and C, we kept 82% of our teams. And I want you to take a look at our numbers compared to nationwide. Overall, nationwide, Science Olympiad only managed to keep 58% of teams, while we were at 82%. And I think that that's phenomenal. And I could split theirs by division, 46 in B. So B was really hit hard, which is no surprise. 69% in Division C. We were 72 and 92. And we had 7 new teams. So that's exciting. You can see that our hit in Division B was primarily in the elementary schools. And you kind of saw that reflected in Division A as well. I know, as I've talked to so many of you all that are teachers this year, I know elementary schools were particularly hit hard trying to figure out how to be virtual just within the classroom and handle that. And the thought of being virtual in the elementary schools was so very difficult. So this is no surprise to us that we had these kind of numbers in the elementary schools. We hope to welcome people back, and but I'm very, very proud of us. And the thing that I also want to say is we had the second highest retention of all the state programs in the nation. We were only beat by one state, I think it was Wyoming, that has overall, over both Division B and C, 14, I think they had last year, they had 11 teams across both divisions, and they increased to 14. So they beat us in terms of percentages, but we were second to that. And I just think that speaks to your commitment, commitment to the board, the commitment of volunteers. This is something that I hugely celebrate. Did somebody have a question? I hear something in the background. Okay, on we go. This is our tournament distribution in 2021. So we had this many teams, this many schools. We divided into 3 regionals. It was actually only 2 regional dates. The second regional date was very large, and we randomly divided teams into 2 sub-regionals, but we were able then to utilize the same event supervisors and run it looking like one big tournament, but we divided it into 2 for purposes of awards, for purposes of qualifying for states. So celebrations of this year. Well, the first celebration, of course, as I showed you our retention numbers, and that was so good I had to even put it before celebrations. But as the result of being so strong in your commitment to continuing figuring out how to go forward, is that we were able to send a second team in Division B to nationals. The way that works is nationals invite 60 teams in each division to join, to come to nationals. So every state plus the District of Columbia gets one automatically. And then the top programs based on size, in other words, the number of teams you have participating, get a second invitation. So in Division B, we were the 13th biggest last year, and we moved all the way up to 8th biggest. So even though we still had like a 72% loss of our teams, compared to other people, we did wonderfully. We sent 2 division teams, Longfellow Middle School and Cooper Middle School, who ably represented us. So thank you very much to those schools. In Division C, last year we were the 15th biggest. This year we were tied for 10th. We would have had to have been 9th to get to send a team, because again, it's the 50 states plus the District of Columbia. So you have to be in the 9th biggest. That looks really, really close. I will tell you we're still about 20 teams from that in Division C. We would have had to have 20 more Division C teams this year to make it up to be the 9th place team to get to have a second invite. But we're getting there. We're getting closer. And we sent 1 Division C team. That was TJ, who also very capably represented us. I'm very proud of our teams this year. It's important to note that this is calculated, the size and who gets 2 invites is calculated every year. So Virginia is not guaranteed 2 Division B slots next year. It all depends on us and how we do in keeping our program strong and moving forward. The tools that made this year happen that I want to talk about, Olympiad. I mean, how can we not talk about Olympiad? The programmer Tuan Duong is a Californian who got involved with the program because his own children participated, and then his wife became a regional director in California. He is a professional programmer, and I'm not sure how he ever had time to do anything else. He had written Olympiad as a registration program years ago, and then saw what need was going to be coming down the pike this summer and added the testing facility to it, and constantly improved it, updated it, worked to make it clean, and he paid all, it was all his own money for all of the server time to make this happen. So that was just an incredible, one of the incredible volunteers of this year that made things happen. The SkyCiv SO add-on was also wonderful. The SkyCiv is written by a professional civil engineering program or company in New Zealand, I think. And they partnered with Science Olympiad and wrote this add-on so we could test the digital boons. So these were wonderful, and I know, yes, you still had to buy SkyCiv, but they made it at a very, very, very low price if you've ever priced its professional product to allow this to happen. And I wanted you to note that there were 375 Science Olympiad tournaments held nationally last year. 342 of them used Olympiad. Tuan and his crew, eventually he brought a crew around him to help. Were just hopping. It last year happened because new events were created. We had Ride at Cadit. We had which was a CAD version of Ride It, Do It. There was the digital structures and SkyCiv. Detector design, which allowed the event detector building to be more than just a written test. It allowed people to do the programming portion of it. That was created in Virginia. Vehicle design, which was a new take on the vehicle build events, was also created in Virginia. And then an event called Experiment and Data Analysis, which was used across the country in place of experimental analysis. We tried new ways of doing things. We tried video submissions for helicopter. That was a mixed bag, I'll be honest. But we tried it. We saw what went well, what didn't go well with that. We all learned, well, we've all learned to do things remotely on Zoom. But I think that there were good things about being able to do new coaches training on Zoom, and also to do the new events open house, which replaced our building events open house, but was a good opportunity to have schools that may not, we've always held that in person in the past, and to be able to have lots of people come in from all over the state, I think was a great boon. And then we had software practice day, which I think was a great tool, an opportunity to practice exactly how things were going to happen in the regionals in Virginia. I've already hinted at it, but I've got to again acknowledge the amazing volunteer and alumni support that went into making this year happen. One of the upsides of being virtual was that it didn't matter where you were located, you could work a tournament. And we pulled volunteers from all over the United States. We pulled our alums who came and said, yes, I've been writing a test for you, but I've never gotten to actually run it at one of your tournaments. I get to, this is great. Our alums were amazing. We went to them for the test writing and so many of our ES roles. And then I got to give a special shout out to Virginia Tech, because instead of fielding their own in-person tournament, the Virginia Tech ESO Club and the Living Learning Communities Tech took on the task of providing almost all of the regional volunteers, which was an amazing, amazing boon. The UVA Chemistry Fraternity and Engineering Student Council provided volunteers from their ranks. Our long-term building event supervisors, after giving a little bit of a deep sigh when they couldn't do their building events as usual, took on other roles and did all kinds of things, a lot of it around vehicle design, but other events as well to make this year happen. And because of all of that energy and people stepping up and saying, yes, we'll do that, we did not have to ask any of you coaches for event riders, at least in B&C, for event riders, supervisors, or tournament day volunteers. And I think that was a welcome relief in this time of stress on teachers, parents, and families. I showed this particular slide at our state tournament, but I wanted to show it again because this shows, where do all these volunteers come from? You can see if your school is named, that some of your alums, these are the high schools that alums came from, because we asked all the ones that worked at the state tournament where they had gone to high school. And these are the ones that were in Virginia. We had a number that actually weren't in Virginia too, from like the Living Learning Communities. So coaches, please, I sent you out an email recently if you're a high school coach, asking you to forward the alumni sign up to your seniors that are graduated. Please do that, because this is where we get that information and we can contact them and continue to have them support the organization. These are the colleges that people came from the work. All right, and I put in the, I know that we had many volunteers from many companies, and I'm sorry, I don't know all of those, but I did add the few that I do know to this as well. So thank you all for that. So it's been an amazing year for volunteers. Alan put out a call in Division A asking high school and middle school students to think about going back and creating a program at their elementary school that they had gone to if their elementary school didn't have a Division A program. I want to call out this year SNET, which was students, it stood for Student Network, and it's students mentoring students here. It was founded by 4 TJ students, and who had a call to work on mentoring and helping other students along in Science Olympiad. So this was its first year. They invited students from some high school teams to join with them to create a mentoring organization. They had an estimated 148 to 150 mentoring sessions this year. And I know that they have already created their steering committee for next year. So it plans to be a thing next year. So we'll be able to send out information sooner about their work. I think they may be spread too thin if they come to each of you individually, but we've talked a little bit about the idea of maybe just running a session on this event and a session on this event, a session on this event, but we will see how that plays out. But I love the fact that this was not just one team, that they pulled in people from several high schools, and we would invite your high schoolers to be involved if they would like to for community service credit. or just because they love this organization and they want to see others succeed. So I think this is a wonderful, wonderful thing that they created. And in fact, I want to celebrate as well because one of the founders won a Nationals SO Founders Scholarship. That's Nationals gives five, I think maybe, Founders Scholarships a year. They started this 2 years ago on the death of one of the founders, and that Gerard Putz, and they collected money and created this scholarship. They're like $10,000 scholarships. All high schoolers in the nation that participate in SO are welcome to apply for these. And this year, one of our TJ founders of this organization, Olivia Ma, won one of these scholarships. So congratulations, Olivia. We're all very proud and excited for you. I think she's going to Michigan. I don't know if you're here, Olivia, but I believe she's going to Michigan to major in engineering. Also, continuing with students mentoring students, Virginia Tech had a college night. The SO group, the outreach arm of them, ran a college night. It was all about getting into college. They had Virginia Tech information, the SO alum group, and then they had breakout rooms by anticipated major. And they had about 20 students registered. They were really pleased to do that. I think they'd love to do that again. So keep an eye out for that for your students as well. A nice way to connect individually with students. Invitationals abounded this year. We're still in celebrations. And I think that is something to celebrate. Teams got to compete more because of virtual invitationals. They didn't have to get in a bus, have to figure out how to travel to these. I know many teams were excited to have easy opportunities to compete against schools from all over the United States. That's not something you typically get to do unless you've gone to nationals. So that has provided an opportunity to that has not happened before. Lots of you commented positively on the invitational opportunities, particularly without having to travel. Please, though, I do want to remind everybody, because this is important, every invitational is independently run and does things differently, and that applies to events, schedule conflicts, and logistics. One problem that was an issue this year is teams need to pay attention to make sure they're on the correct tournament Olympiad site. Every tournament has its own Olympiad site, and that was often a problem this year. People, contacting us saying they couldn't get in, or whatever. So that's always something to remember. And if you're using an invitational to practice for your VASO regional, don't be panicked by events that we aren't running here. You don't have to do all the events at an invitational. You're going to practice what you want to practice. But those are great opportunities. And I want to thank the Lake Braddock High School team for running a Division B invitational, and the Fairfax High School team for running a Division C invitational. Having those is a real boon for teams practicing in our state. All right, so I know what everybody really is here for. We all want to know what next year looks like. So let's start with the events. All right. So the first thing I actually want to do is I want to look at the events last year, because I think that's always interesting to inform. So these are all the events that we had last year. The colors signify the grouping of the events. The greens are the life science, yellow is earth, purple is chemistry, gray is physics, orange is the tech, and blue is what's called inquiry events. In Division B, 19%, this is the percentage of teams that skipped doing this event at regionals. I don't think we need to be concerned about how high the average is. The average is 19%. It may seem high, but a lot of schools field a much smaller second or third team. And so then they're going to skip these events. But it still is interesting to see which events were skipped the most. I don't think it's a surprise that we had digital structures, vehicle design, and Ride It, Cat It. But it is kind of interesting to note that Road Scholar continues to be a highly skipped event. And I'm not sure what there is about that. Density Lab was skipped a lot. Water quality, ornithology. This was like the second year of ornithology, and I was surprised to see that skipped so much. But the board pays attention to these as we think about our own event slate for the next year and what will be states only events and not. This is the numbers in Division C. So again, you can see detector design, digital structures, vehicle design were the most skipped. Those required the most preparation ahead of time. Wiki, but fossils is a little high there. And again, ornithology to my surprise. But here's the thing that I know everybody wants to see. So we'll stay on this slide for a minute. You can take your screenshots. This is National's proposed 2022 event list. Everything that is in bold is a new event. The notes on this exhibit are really important. This slate is preliminary. Nationals may make changes to it. Now, I will tell you, I don't think they will, or if they would, maybe just to one event. Nationals tends to not do that, and I know that there have been some questions from some state directors about some of these events, and Nationals has come back and said, no, we're committed to this. So VASO may not run this slate exactly or in its entirety, meaning that we could make a substitution for an event. We don't typically do that a lot, because I know that makes it hard when you go out to invitationals or for the teams to go to nationals. When we make a substitution, we do that very carefully, very thoughtfully. But we might choose some events to be states only. And we'll choose those. And when we choose states only events, we choose them based on things like how logistically, how hard are they to run? So maybe we only want to run them once a season rather than at regionals. Are they very expensive for teams to participate in? Then maybe we only want that to be a states event. We try to be thoughtful around a wide variety of things as we do this. The final event for list for Virginia will be published as we work out the 2022 tournament logistics, which means we'll probably be also, I guess I should also say, we need to see rules for all of these. Nationals has been writing rules, and I'm going to say a little bit more about that in a minute when we talk about what Nationals is planning. But it's useful for us to see what these rules say as we make our considerations too. And we typically don't have access to the rules before you do. So so we need a little bit of time after the rules are published for us to look and make our final decisions as well. I'm not sure that I have to, well, I've been asked, like, are there 23 or 24? So I think 24 events in each division. Storm the Castle and Trajectory are old, they're slinging events. Storm the Castle is trebuchets. Trajectory is like an elastic slinging. There's no written test in either of those, though I know typically in the physics events there are written tests. Sounds of Music is coming down from C into B, and C is getting Wi-Fi Lab, which you may recall a couple of years we trialed this event. So some of you have seen this event. It's about time. When do they publish the rules is the question. They will publish the rules in early September. Anatomy always changes. The heredity the designer genes is going out in bioprocess lab, cell biology coming in. We're getting green generation. Ornithology is continuing again for another year. Dynamic Planet is changing its event. Geologic mapping is going out. Remote sensing is coming in. Fossils are going out. Rocks and minerals is coming in. Solar system is replacing Reach for the Stars. And in Division C, instead of protein modeling, we're getting an entirely new event, which I've never seen rules for, called environmental chemistry. I don't know much about that event. All right, so let's talk about what Nationals is doing. Nationals, first of all, is going to continue with MySO, which is that online individual student program that they ran this year. If you had students or new people that were doing that, that will still be there. They're talking about updating the topics, changing it around a little bit. I haven't gotten a lot of information about what that means, but presumably in late August, we will see some specifics about it. It was, team members could do it. It could be people who weren't on teams. It was just an open program. There were free portions of it, and then there were paid portions of it too. So the paid portion was if you wanted to compete in the STEM showdown at the end of the month on the topic, but everything else was free. The lesson plans, the talks were free. And I think the STEM showdown was only like $10 if you wanted to participate in that. So I know we had a number of people do that. I kept seeing Virginians on the leaderboard every month, which was very exciting. So they will continue that. Nationals is leaving all the tournament types on the table for next year. So virtual is going to be allowed. The satellite model, which I'll talk about in a minute, and in-person tournaments, all of those are on the table. Nationals is excited to see particularly virtual invitationals continue, but they recognize it provides more opportunities for teams, and it actually in some ways challenges nationals content of their rules. So they see that as a positive thing to have so many more tournaments, so many more people participating that way. But they also recognized that because if we're going to continue to have virtual invitationals and be able to compete across the whole country, that there's a greater desire for consistency across the many invitationals and the way things happen, right? You saw me say in that earlier slide that invitationals, that they're different. They're independently run, and you could be facing who knows what at an invitational. Because people will come back to me and go, well, that invitational didn't do things the way you are. They're independent, they're doing their own thing. But I think Nationals is going to try to look towards creating more consistency, more guidelines for how to run these events. And of course, this year was particularly challenging because we were all trying to figure out how we did it. Nationals, so on to my next bullet point, and this is big. Nationals has already announced that the national tournament next May, so in May 2022, will not be in person. It will be a satellite model using Olympiad. And what does that mean? The satellite model is their middle model that says that all of the activities, all of the Science Olympiad activities have to take place at the school. They cannot take place in the home. They will all be proctored and monitored in the school setting. Nationals has already done that because that's what Caltech was willing to do, right? The tournament was supposed to be at Caltech in Pasadena this coming year. And they're, like many colleges, not willing to have a large tournament on their campus. They're fearful of what the winter may bring. So this is a final decision. We have been told that we're not going to suddenly get further down the pike and they're going to be in person. But they are encouraging state organizations to find ways to run the building events this year. If not at regionals, then at states. Okay, now before everybody goes, oh, and signs off in great frustration, let's talk about what that means Virginia's thinking. What are our priorities in light of this? And I want to say all of this that I say now is a developing tentative, our priorities are our priorities, but it's important to recognize that this situation continues to develop. We're still figuring out what we can do. We've only had this information just very recently from Nationals. So we have to respond to it as we get it. So VASO priorities, first priority is bringing back the building events and having them count in the overall score, finding some good way to do that. It's a huge priority, I think, to keep the strong relationship with the alums and the other volunteers who made our last year so spectacular. It's a priority to respect our relationship with our venues and to work within their requirements and guidelines. To continue to make that be a strong, positive relationship moving forward. And it's a priority to create a meaningful tournament experience for competitors, coaches, and volunteers. We know that everybody wants to return to normal, but everything is still uncertain. And I hate the phrase the new normal, but I also recognize that that there is a sense of that. I will tell you the venues are nervous about large groups of people in their facilities. Schools will be in session, but with precautions. There's questions about making sure everybody is vaccinated and the legalities of that. It's tricky. This is a tricky issue. There's some ideas that are informing our thinking. So Olympiad, I think, was a good system from an ES and scoring perspective, and coaches generally felt comfortable with it too, and the students eventually, did get there too as well. And they continue to improve it. They have made, so that's important to know. VASO has already been told by one venue that they can't accommodate a big group, but they want to stay involved. So we're already starting to see some push on that. I want to be upfront and say that I consider satellite tournaments to be tricky in general for a large population. I think it'll work okay for nationals, but in a satellite tournament, it means that coaches are responsible for setting up every event, labs, materials, build test spaces, and monitoring the safety of every event. And coaches have different comfort levels with the various events, and they feel unprepared to handle parts of that. Not all schools have, somebody has gone off of mute, and if you wouldn't mind muting yourself, I'd appreciate that. Okay, let's see. Thank you. Not all schools have access to all the equipment or the spaces to test all the builds. And then many of the build events are very dependent on where they're run, like ceiling height for ping pong parachute. And the build events may not be comparable between teams, like Wi-Fi lab in a hallway. It's very dependent on the hallway. I see a question to say, does satellite mean each team is at their own school, or could there be some larger spaces together? Well, let me continue to tell you what I'm thinking, Tim. It's a great question. There can be some versions of satellite. So we'll try to work on that. But all of these things that I've just said now is leading VASO to consider a hybrid approach, partly satellite and partly in person, if we can make that work. And I'm cautiously optimistic that we can. So, but again, I've written tentative across all this because I don't want to be held to this in stone, but I think that this is a good idea. I think this is a way to move forward. So what I think we could do is we would have a written test day. So everything that's a written test would be all the teams in Virginia on that one day. It would include the written test component of the hybrid events like Sounds of Music or It's About Time, a Wi-Fi lab. The written test would be administered in Olympiad, as you would expect. The teams would have to gather at their schools, and the tests would need to be proctored by coaches and or teachers, a team of volunteers. And I would not object if a couple of teams wanted to congregate in one school, but the written tests would need to be proctored to make sure that students aren't going outside the browser, are utilizing allowed resources. The tests would be on that traditional 6-session schedule that we have. So you would have still, but teams would be gathered together, and partners would be allowed to be beside each other or in earshot rather than distanced in different rooms, which was supposed to be the standard for this year of doing these things at home and having to go to the least common denominator. And then I would think that hopefully we could have regional build events, kind of have a series of pop-up days around Virginia where the build events would be held. The pop-up day you attend would determine which regional you're in, which makes a world of sense when you think about the fact that like the height for ping pong parachute matters. So you want everybody who's competing in one locale at the same day to have the same judging conditions, or again, the hallway and Wi-Fi lab or whatever. The teams would have a 2-hour, let's say 2-hour, I mean, that's a guess, window on the campus to rotate through doing all their building events. And that would be all they would have. That would not, they would not be allowed to be on campus before or after that session. Teams would be limited to like a couple of chaperones, and the build events wouldn't be open to the public. But then we could have that tight and contained, and we could just have them rotating through, and the team could cheer, right? If you move from If you moved from Storm the Castle to Sounds of Music to this to that, the whole team could go and could cheer. And so there would still be audience and cheering and camaraderie of the team. Some of the build events, though, particularly some of the hybrids like It's About Time or Sounds of Music, might be self-scheduled and done via Zoom on written test day. There are some of these events that can be done fairly readily on Zoom. And so we would have to be looking at the specifics about which and how that would happen. We had a question about when would we find out the session schedule to know when test conflicts are? Yes, we have to wait for nationals to publish their rules because their session conflicts are in there. And then you would need us to publish as well too, our schedule, because our schedule can change from theirs, though ours is based primarily on theirs. In-person pop-ups, there are some challenges to them, but it would get us out there and doing this. It would probably require us to ask teams to bring a volunteer or two. Also, move them to the tournament to work in that couple-hour session. It would increase our costs in 2022. It would require, I think this one actually may be the biggest one, it would require teams to give 2 Saturdays to a tournament rather than one. It would be the written day and then the pop-up day you did. And it would also require coaches to finalize their roster before the written test day. And it would disallow them from changing it for the pop-ups, because we have to have a way of closing the roster time down, ensuring there's only 15 students in a team and not putting somebody in, rotating somebody out, in and out, in and out. And that's mostly a Division C issue where things get divided a lot at the last minute, and you would need, if you're a Division C team, to have that all settled and set by written test day. Okay, I'm gonna pause here for a second and invite people you can, in the chat, you can give some comments if you'd like to unmute yourself and say something or ask a question about these ideas. I know it's a lot to take in, but I thought I'd give people a chance to say something.
Hi,
Right,
Karen.
yes.
I have one question regarding the events. So I saw the written tests, the build events. Where would lab style events fall into that kind of classification?
The truth is, so if we were going to do this, let's go back to the event list. That would be primarily chemistry ones. I think that we would have to go back. I think maybe some polling would need to happen, right? Because I don't think that we would bring them in on build days. In a lab event, like let's say forensics, which I know is your event, the lab is intimately connected with the written test. So we can't bring people in to just do the lab, right? In a rotation where you get 15 minutes with each build event. That really wouldn't work to bring in for the labs. So we would need to think of, are coaches comfortable doing and setting up all the materials and doing the safety for a lab? I'm a little bit more optimistic about that in C than in B. I'm not trying to diss the Division B coaches, but we do have elementary schools that don't even have the facilities. That there's a lot of components to think about in setting up a lab and in-lab safety and having the required materials. So I'm pretty sure in B we'd run back to presenting the results, doing videos, and we could discuss this in C as we talk with coaches about what they're able to do. But that's the stress with the lab events, Sam. It's a good question. And I know that's not the answer that people who are committed to these events want to hear. It's a tricky one for this. Anyone else? All right, somebody said there was some issues in using computers from schools to access the Olympiad platform because written events are going to be in school. Is there any guidance on using bring your own device, or should school laptops be used? I personally would be happy. You can use any device as far as I'm concerned. Bring your own device would be okay. I would think that we would probably run a small software practice day again, just to give people a chance if they want, or as coaches, you would be, give you the opportunity to access Olympiad at the school and have children and have the students test out their devices or their setups for accessing it. I have a feeling invitationals are going to be very satellite driven this year. So if you plan to participate in invitationals, you'll be looking at a lot of that too, would be my guess, since nationals is setting that standard. Anyone else? It seems the network, not the devices, would be the issue at schools. I think people are going to have to try that out. I know that a lot of people did do Olympiad from schools. We had some team, our nationals teams did some stuff from the schools. I know we had some teams at state that gathered at their schools, but still did the proper distancing, but decided to be at their school instead of in their homes at states, and that worked. So it seems like it's doable. We had an issue of not being allowed to print the test. Are we allowed to print next year? No, I don't think that would be allowed. If we're using Olympiad, we need to make sure that people have access to the same equipment, and printing's a funny one. Though if we're at schools, maybe printers are available to kids. It is not the standard for Olympiad, but that's a decision we'll have to make next year. And it's a good question, Jessica. Thank you for asking that. Oh yes, you can't print tests from Olympiad easily. Actually, you can do a weird thing. They try to block that so you can't too. Thank you, Emily, for that. I know it's very hard to not do paper and pencil, though I think students have gotten very used to that this year. They certainly were allowed to have scrap paper that they could write on, fiddle with, though I know for Code Busters, for example, it was hard not to be able to print the test. Regarding school access, there's also the potential issue that students will need to be careful about using their personal accounts instead of the school accounts. Yes. Yep. There are issues to sort out with this, but I think the value of this is that it can be proctored and made sure that students are using proper resources. For those of you that participated this year, I think you know what I'm referring. We did have a challenging year around students being too tempted to utilize unallowed resources. And I would like to not have that be a thing this year, not have us have to deal with it or do any of the stuff this year.
I think, Karen, we had a question about practice days.
Practice days. Can more practice days be included? No, I doubt it. It is a huge production to set up a practice day in Olympiad. A big production. So I think we would probably only do it once, but once should be plenty to access and try out the platform, and invitationals are available to people to also stand as a Olympiad practice as well. We're also going to be a little pushed this year time-wise. If we go by this model with the written tests in Olympiad and build days, we need more days to get through our regional season, and then we have to do states, and nationals is earlier this year. It's on like May 12th this coming year. So we have to be done earlier to get information to nationals earlier, but our season is going to be wider. So that causes some challenges too. But as I said, there are invitationals as well. More new messages. Let's see what we've got. Yes, invitationals. There were 2 national software practice days this year, in addition to the Virginia one. And by all means, do those. I would recommend coming to the Virginia one though, because you'll see the software we're going to use, right? You'll see. So yes, thanks, Julie Cox, for that. That was a good thought. Anybody else, any questions on this? I know that there's a lot to take in with it, and I also know it's a little disappointing. And I'm not saying we're wedded to it, but as I said, venues are nervous and we're still in kind of a soft place. But we want to get these builds in. We want to be together as much as we can be and creating a tournament atmosphere as much as we can. Can you go back to the event slate slide? Where was that? There. Take a screenshot. Anybody else? Any questions on this? I do have a few more slides, a few more things to say. We're not quite done, but I thought I'd stop after I presented the idea. Okay. I don't see anymore, so we're going to go on. VASO is, whoopsie, I should have changed to this is actually the 2021 financials, and we don't have a budget yet. So pretend this slide says 2021 financials, but these are the financials. Our fiscal year ends at the end of June, so it's not complete. There will be a few more in technology, subscription charges, our Zoom charge and the Google phone, a few things like that, and storage. But you can see that financially, VASO's had a very successful year. We priced this year with a 15% discount and an expectation that we would only have 70% retention. Well, clearly we had way better retention than that. Again, yay for that. But also, a large part of our financial success this year was in the unanticipated large donors. Thank you. A number of them came from you all. Over 3.5 times what we anticipated when we budgeted. Our expenses were a little less than anticipated too. Olympiad was passed to teams free of cost, though I'm not sure that will happen next year. This is a big boon, and I know it looks large. We are a nonprofit, but I do need to say that we had 3 years where VASO ran a deficit, and in 1 year it was a rather large deficit. So this is a welcome opportunity to add back to that. As we look at next year's costs, you could, if we go ahead and we have in-person or these pop-up days, facilities, travel, food is going to suddenly rear its head, and those are big costs. So do know that that will be something to add back. Okay, questions about that? So what's coming up? First, enjoy your summer, please. I think we all deserve some time if we can take it. I invite you to share your thoughts. If you're on this call, you've got my email. Please take the opportunity to share your thoughts by email about these ideas. I do read them all. I will compile and look at them. I don't know if we'll run a survey, maybe, but we would be interested in what you think or you need. In particular, I'm particularly concerned about the idea that it might be 2 days. Our team's going to be okay with 2 days for a tournament rather than 1. Or would you rather go straight satellite and figure out how to run all of these events and all of these labs? Or can you run labs? There's a lot of questions to ask. Yes, there's a question about teams needing to pay for custodial fees for the use of schools on tournament days. We do already. But I suspect that it would be vastly bigger. And maybe we would need some protective stuff. And but if we're on these pop-up days where teams only go from place to place to place to place, there's no team room. No giant award ceremony. It would cut down on the places we used. Oh, you mean on written test days? Oh, well, that's an interesting question. That's a good thought, and write it to me in an email and I will keep track of all of those concerns. Julie, did you have to use, I mean, Longfellow did some of their testing for nationals. Did you have to pay custodial fees?
We did not use the school at all
Oh,
for
okay.
nationals.
nationals?
I think that Cooper did. But I think that there has been a thought, we can be kind of sneaky, frankly, at Longfellow, because we have a long hallway where we don't people necessarily know what we're doing. But I think that there was a concern that we might have to pay custodial fees if we did come into the school for a Saturday for nationals. It's just something to think about. I'm just, brainstorming. But individual teams might need to pay.
And that is, yeah.
Something to think about.
It is something to think about. I'm not sure that I can make that better. I think that that would be something to think about if you collect any team dues, or Sam says, and Emily to reach out to your principal. As a school club or a school activity, I would hope that it would be okay, as opposed to us coming in where they make us pay. So please, when we know the dates, when we have that all set up, you could start talking to your principals. So let's see, what else do we have? The VASO board will meet in early August to discuss more as we learn more about the school. The rule books are supposed to be available on September 7th. And then after that, in late August, early September, we'll have virtual meetings. We'll talk more about what we've determined, what we've been able to figure out we can do with our venues. Sorry, I was being a little bit start and stop there because I was also reading the chat. So it's still also, we're looking at, people are still very concerned about getting the spaces at the schools and what kind of issues they're going to be with that. One of the pluses about having the pop-up days would be that you would not have to be asking for gym space in your school. Now you might have to if you go to an invitational and you do all the events, but I can tell you gym space is very tricky. So that might be the kind of space you would have to pay for. Maybe you wouldn't have to pay for a few classrooms or whatever. You probably only need a couple of classrooms. We're going to be working out and thinking about all the issues. There are teachers on this board to help us think through what would this look like as we do this, as we go forward. What guidance can we give you? We'll take your questions. These are all important thoughts, and I appreciate everybody sharing them. VASO is committed to participant and volunteer safety, recognizing the personal, financial, and mental toll that the virus and necessary preventive measures have taken on everyone and institutions, and the challenges of getting back to normal, and the concerns and the worries about that. We're committed to timely communications. We don't try to sit on this information. This is why I'm telling you as much as I can tell you now, and then we'll continue to tell you as we know and as we refine it. And we ask on your side of timely communications that you understand when we're telling you something that's tentative or that is a thought process versus the in stone version of the way things are going to be. We're committed to transparency in our thinking. So we're trying to tell you as we're thinking it, what we're thinking, and ultimately adopting a budget and fees that we think best reflect our anticipated costs. All right, that is the end of my presentation. Does anyone have any other questions or issues? Will I be able to share today's recording? Yes, it's going to go up on the YouTube channel. I'll also make sure that the slide deck is available as well. Again, I want to thank all of you for your continued enthusiasm, commitment, making sure that STEM, knowing that STEM is important and that these opportunities are valuable. I know that there was so much concern about the generation that we're leaving behind from our year of being virtual, the pandemic, and I like to think that this was a force to combat that. So thank you for helping make this year be successful and all that it could be, as we figure this out together, and committed to doing this together. Thank you, everyone.